The best patch to Overwatch 2 ever just dropped, and you wouldn't have heard about it because Blizzard doesn't seem to be selling this patch like the massive game upgrade that it actually is, probably because Bobby Kotick has over-leveraged the goodwill of this franchise so much that there's nothing left to milk. So now I think the devs are just trying to drop it like it's hot and hope the gamers just latch on. Well, we need to spread the word on this because I think the devs did a phenomenal job with these changes. They raised the health on all of the heroes, so dying to insta-kill explosions no longer happens, which makes the game feel less punishing and frustrating. But on top of that, they increased the hitbox size on everything in the game, making it a lot easier to aim, which makes the game much more reliable, but more importantly, fun and satisfying and responsive. You no longer need to be a pro player just to hit a strafing Kiriko. And if you thought that was going to make the game play too brawly, DPS have a new passive now that applies a minus 20% anti-healing effect to anything that they target for 2 seconds. This cuts down on heal botting support gameplay in a massive way. Those annoying team fights where it felt like both teams would just heal forever and hide are gone entirely. So overall, everyone is hitting more shots, which feels nice, but you don't explode because you have a bit more health to work with. But most importantly, DPS are uniquely capable of breaking out of these long healing stalemates. So the fights always have some flow to them. I think it's a great patch to attract new players, or if you gave up on Overwatch over the years, this is a huge change to the game that's definitely worth a try. The previous version of Overwatch played a bit like whiff, 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 explode. What the hell was that? But now, because everyone's shots are more reliable, everything's more consistent and reasonable. The time to kill doesn't sneak up on you. It more works things down over time, especially when you're team shooting. Team shooting together is one of the more effective ways to work things down. A little bit less of the solo hero that just has the ability to make something explode randomly with big headshots or combos. That doesn't happen as often as before. Let's talk about the biggest general takeaways from the patch. The biggest power spike goes towards the DPS class, who were the weakest by far before. Now they have the best passive. And in fact, it doesn't only just help them secure kills, it also sets up their teammates to be even more effective, meaning that focus firing together, I think mostly with your tank hero, especially working together with them, you're going to feel like you're going to overwhelm neutral fight healing always. Like, that's the new rule of the game. If supports want to save something out of position, they have to use their big save cooldowns. Just healing alone isn't going to do it anymore, where it used to in the previous version of the game. Now, we might expect tanks to take an L now that they will have undoubtedly less healing. They're going to get that DPS passive applied to them a lot. I think both tanks are going to experience that. It's going to be kind of a wash, and instead you're going to be looking to leverage space for your DPS, and getting them in position will be a good way to snowball an advantage overall. I think previously tank gameplay was a lot more stalemate around your supports, playing off them, needing to maximize how much healing you could receive. Well, now you're going to get less healing, and you got to get offense out of your DPS to really win fights. That's going to be the best way to actually secure a fight win. So I think it actually benefits tank gameplay, even if tank power is more or less going to maybe feel the same. The big way you're going to change, though, is not expecting to be able to turret up and just anchor forever with infinite health with your supports pumping resources into you, but now instead I think you have to go a bit more aggressive to see any use out of that position. Also, keep in mind that the new bigger hitboxes, yes, tanks are easier to hit, but I don't think anybody struggled to hit them before. In fact, now the biggest surprise to me, I think, is going to be targeting support heroes, which were in the past durable based on all of their escape abilities, but also relatively small hitboxes, which now are very forgiving with the bigger hitboxes for everybody. So targeting off of the tank onto the supports is going to be a new, more viable way to play for sure, especially since the DPS passive stops supports from healing one another, which used to be one way that you could fortify the backline. Well, now that just doesn't really work. You can't infinitely heal each other as support. You need some offense in order to win the fight. The support role overall is still going to be very strong, but the biggest L takers in the whole patch are certainly the heal botting style supports. Like Lifeweaver, I don't know really what he adds in this new patch, and he's going to be harder to play for sure, though he can escape and play defensively. Just the whole idea of getting healing stats to your team is weaker overall always, because the DPS passive is going to be up and on your team very often. Other characters like Mercy's healing staff is going to be weaker. That's a lot easier to overwhelm now, though I will say Mercy with damage amp is quite important. So Zenyatta, Nano Boost, these things that change the breakpoints in order to get the time to kill faster back to what maybe it was like before this patch is going to be quite key as well. So knowing which support character to pick with your given teammate is going to help a lot amplify them. Otherwise, you're really going to want to look out for the types of supports that can deal offense themselves. So a character like Kiriko, though pocketing and saving a teammate's worse now, her projectiles are bigger. So her offensive threat and her DPS playmaking is better than before, actually, on this new version of the game. Overall, I think the devs really wanted to make the game play a bit more individually minded, even though like team shooting is way stronger than before, but everyone's got the self-heal passive and you're not as reliant on your teammates necessarily to sustain your position, but you also can't really shoot your way out of an engagement because the time to kill is longer. So if you're outmatched and outgunned, you're going to expect to need to regroup more often than whereas in the previous version of the game, there's a few characters that could have like insane pop-off potential. It used to be the case where a character like Sojourn could play way out in front, and with her small hitbox and her time to kill to zone you out anyway, then the Mercy beam attached, making her kind of unkillable. Well, that was like a position that was really hard to clear unless you hit a headshot on her to burst her through that healing. Well, now you don't need that necessarily, and her healing stats will go down and she'll have to get out of there. And tank heroes as well. Tanks are going to have to move out of their position more than you're used to. You'll have to give up space and concede ground or go aggressive, like one of the two. You can't just turret up and anchor and expect to just get heal pocketed forever. That goes for any type of character that plays that way, that used to be able to just stand in front and receive healing. You kind of can't do that anymore. Next, let's talk about which damage heroes are going to be best. I think from what I've gathered, most high-level analysts immediately assume with bigger hitboxes, more reliable crits, that hit scans are just going to be the best. Not only that, but they'll be the most consistent ways to apply the DPS passive. Seems like a no-brainer, but I'm going a bit of the other direction, little mad scientist theory crafting against the instructed opinions of analysts that are supposed to be experts and get paid to know this game. So we'll see in the coming hours and days if this theory pans out. But I think it actually goes the other way, where although hit scans can hit their crits more consistently, it's not a transformative gameplay change the way that it's going to be for projectile heroes, and especially like supportive style damage that you're used to just whiffing more, now is more reliable. So while a hit scan character out in front, taking an angle, hitting a headshot is more consistent, everybody else who's used to shooting back at that character and not really making a big impact will now be far more consistent at hitting crits on them. Are you with me on this one? It's a little crazy, but I think you'll notice this as you log into the game and try this out. So a character like Genji, for example, needs very specific distance control on his alternate fire, because the closer he is, he can hit all three in the head, which makes an insane burst damage. And then a little bit farther away, it's possible to hit two. Now that the hitboxes are bigger, he can be even farther away. Or let's take a character like Lucio, who has these really slow moving projectiles that do 20 damage a pellet. He shoots 4 at a time, and that's 80 in one burst. That can crit to do 160 damage, which is an insane amount. You're not expected to hit that value. However, up against a character like Widowmaker, who normally, let's say, at the highest skill tiers, would be able to hold the angle and then very carefully pluck the Lucio's head out of the whatever wall he's bouncing off of. Well, now that still happens, okay? The Widow can still hit that shot, but my argument is she could have hit it before. That skill ceiling was already achieved by some of our best players. The surprising thing is that the Lucio now has much bigger hitboxes back at the Widow, so it's a bit more even of a matchup. I actually think the previous version of the game, where hit scan was the one damage type that was both a burst and consistent, that made them far more reliable in the top tier dominant damage picks in the game, where we've seen metas where Widow or Sojourn were just like better than everything else and it wasn't even close. Well, now whether you're a Lucio or a Kiriko or Torb or whoever, shooting these projectiles back at these characters, often some of them have smaller hitbox. I mean, Widow's is massive, but Sojourn's was tiny before and she was really shifty with her big bursts of movement. Well, now I think you feel like you can consistently hit that target, and especially with team shooting, being able to overwhelm the healing values on that pocket pick, I don't know. I don't think hit scans are like far and away the winner. If anything, I think projectiles are far easier and now develop a new play style, because before, hit scans knew they could be consistent from kind of any position, whereas projectiles had to play in specific positions to get the most use out of the reliability of their weapons. Well, now everybody's weapons are more reliable. In the previous version of the game, I felt like the projectile heroes had to lob their projectiles out and pray that the target walked into them a lot of times, but now it's way more consistent. So you're going to expect to hit shots, where before you were kind of praying and hoping you hit the first one so that you could follow up and commit with the second one. That is quite a bit different now. I think a character that a lot of analysts think is just going to be Garbo is Junkrat, who of course is one of my pocket analyst prediction picks that turned out to be right in Overwatch 2. Everyone thought he was going to be bad at the launch as well. Now they think he's going to be bad again. Well, I'm going to tell you this, those new truck-sized projectiles coming down the lane, chunking something down, applying the DPS passive debuff onto things. I think Junk is good, but won't be the flanking one-hit kill Junkrat from before. It's going to be harder to go in deep and expect to get the same results, but just as like a zoning character that helps the team with team shooting and setting things up with CC, that is going to be reliable. I mean, any character that can like toss a damage ability out and hit it reliably, well, now those targets have the debuff applied to them, and Junkrat's mines and nades accidentally hitting is going to do that. So don't be too harsh with what you think is going to matter. Like, on one hand, the game is revolutionarily different. On the other hand, the matchups still matter in terms of you're still playing Overwatch 2. You're just playing a version of the game where team shooting and teamwork is better than just burst kills on their own, and you won't expect supports to keep everyone alive indefinitely. We'll talk about a few outliers though. I think the sniper class of character is just going to be harder to play overall because they're typically less mobile, first of all, and they're kind of all in on that burst of damage to land to really be effective. And in a lot of cases, the health pools are bigger now, so not going to be as impressive on that front. And to confirm eliminations just takes a little bit of teamwork anyway. So sniping is kind of overrated and a little overkill. It may still work if you hit your shots, but meanwhile, the enemy can just sort of all vaguely look at you, and it's harder for your supports to keep you alive. Not impossible. Supports have amazingly strong defensive abilities, so let's not undervalue those, but just healing stats alone isn't going to be able to protect that classic character that's typical for focus fire target selection. Now as well, applying a healing debuff all the time means that anything that's sort of static is going to be viable for being focus fire targeted down. Alternatively, characters that are going to be a lot better are flanking style heroes, ones that just can get in and out of combat to avoid focus fire on them and to leverage a mobility advantage, just either cross-firing onto the enemy tank, working them down from the back, creating some pressure, applying that debuff, or going at the back line. Especially as it used to be the case that two support characters could heal each other kind of infinitely. Once you start to wane down how much healing stats they can give one another, the breakpoints of being able to overwhelm that and actually be a menace in the backline now and leverage an offensive advantage, that's gonna be much more common. So flanker characters like Tracer, Sombra, Genji, Reaper, take your pick. They're all a bit easier to play. They don't gain the biggest advantage from the hitbox changes, but enough to definitely feel the advantage of things being easier to hit. Specifically them hitting support characters, I think, is going to be the biggest surprise, and then the supports heal each other less, so big buffs for them. Tank heroes I think lose are tanks like Orisa, who just sort of anchor the front and need to peel but have limited mobility to begin with. I think instead you'll want characters that can either go at the enemy's backline more aggressively or protect your own, whereas Orisa kind of just vaguely anchors the front line usually. And there's a lot of maps where she'll struggle to peel back to her backline. A tank I think is going to be surprisingly good is Junker Queen, because she has high damage and high speed, so she'll be able to tear through some of these higher health points that the enemy has while also healing herself. I don't see tank gameplay transforming altogether. However, you will be able to aggressively go at the enemy's backline, which you kind of just previously never had the chance to do. So overall, it'll be harder to counter aggressive tanks, especially if you're pairing up with your DPS. Guys, that's everything for today's video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.